Let's take another look at this tuba player from the beginning of my presentation. See if you can spot the cause of his difficulties. If you still didn't spot it, let's take a look at him playing some octave slurs and note his airstream direction. On the middle C, it is a little tough to see where the airstream is going, but on the high C it becomes clear that he's blowing the airstream down. When he slurs down to low C, however, his lips flip position and he switches to an upstream player. He makes this switch from upstream to downstream about the same range every time, around his middle C. When he plays this etude, you'll be able to see his lips fighting for predominance in this range, and here he almost always cracks the note when this happens. When confronted with students who have this sort of problem, many teachers recommend correcting the treble pitch by practicing exercises that approach it from above and below. While good-intentioned, you can see how this sort of practice only exacerbates his issue. He also struggles with his upper register. The high notes he can play are pretty solid, but just above he can't manage to squeeze out any more notes, not even with a soft and thin sound. He volunteered to show me a trick embouchure he discovered on his own that allows him to play higher, but he told me his teacher had discouraged him from using it, and that if he just kept practicing with the more centered mouthpiece placement, his muscles would develop and his high range would improve. When a player's embouchure type is correct for his or her anatomy, this may be true, but not in cases where the player is using the wrong embouchure type for his face. A little experimentation of moving his mouthpiece placement to a low placement embouchure type shows a lot of promise. He can not only play higher this way, but with his entire range now upstream, he has no embouchure type reversal and his break is gone.
One more of those.
Before I finish, I want to give you a brief summary of the embouchure types once again. Remember that these embouchure types aren't choices to be made by individual players or teachers, but are based on which type works best for the particular player's unique anatomy. In and of itself, no one type is better or worse than the others, as long as it is the correct embouchure type for the individual. The very high placement type is characterized by a mouthpiece placement that has 70% to 90% upper lip inside the mouthpiece and is downstream. These players always push the mouthpiece and lips together up towards the nose to ascend and pull them down towards the chin to descend. They usually play with their teeth aligned and a horn angle close to straight out. This embouchure type is very common. The medium-high placement embouchure type is also downstream, but they tend to place less upper lip inside the mouthpiece, around 50% to 70% upper lip. These players always pull the mouthpiece and lips together down to ascend and push them up to descend. It's more common for these players to have a receded jaw position and a horn angle slightly down. This embouchure type is also very common. The low placement embouchure type is the only one that places less upper lip than lower lip inside the mouthpiece, around 50% to 90% lower lip inside, making it an upstream embouchure. These players will almost always pull down to ascend and push up to descend. The horn angle and teeth position for this type shows more variation than the downstream types. This embouchure type is more rare than the other types, partly because fewer individuals have the anatomy that makes this embouchure work, and partly because so many downstream teachers don't understand this type and change all their students to downstream types. For students who are truly low placement types, this never works as well, and even can cause a complete breakdown in their playing abilities. Thank you for taking the time to watch my presentation. I hope that it has taken some of the mystery out of brass embouchures for you, and will give you some useful tools for further exploration. If you are interested in learning more, I suggest books by Donald Reinhardt, who was perhaps the first author to make embouchure types an important part of his pedagogy. Since Reinhardt's terms are easily confused, I've chosen to use simplified nomenclature developed by Doug Elliott, a former student of Reinhardt's. Ultimately, it doesn't matter what we call these embouchure characteristics, as long as we recognize that there is no such thing as a single proper brass embouchure. A widespread understanding of this offers exciting possibilities for brass playing and pedagogy. Collectively, we are smarter than any individual, so I'd like to urge you to take some time to look closely at brass players around you and share what you discover. Always remember that our goal is to make music. It's good to spend time daily forgetting all about technique and just play.